Welcome to FrieNDA,
the podcast where two interesting game people
talk to other interesting game people
about interesting game things.
I'm your host, Mike Stout.
And I'm your other host, Annie Vandermeer.
So let's get started.
Yeah!
I tried to make that as douche nozzly as I could. Did it work?
Got that radio DJ in there.
I also changed my volume a lot during that, so I probably pushed it into the red.
That's what they would do, so it fits.
But they've got good people who can help them recover from it.
Yeah, talented people with a soundboard that just push different buttons to get different toilet flush noises.
I actually one time had a sound designer make... Okay, this is still not probably a great story for the intro, but I had to have a sound designer make poop and toilet noises one time, and he did too good of a job.
Oh, no.
I loved it, though.
Oh, God. That reminds me of, I didn't write the fart jokes. The other writer...
In my defense, I didn't write the fart jokes.
Yeah, I totally didn't, but they were in Panic High, and I was implementing everything with it, so I had to go on freesound.org and search for fart sounds, and some of them were just nightmarish. Like, you didn't use a machine to make this noise.
Oh, no, this was just someone just ate some beans and then just went to town on a microphone?
Yeah, they sounded, how would we put it, a little too homegrown.
Okay, we definitely have to put that clearly in the podcast. Homegrown.
It is post GDC, the week of insanity that pretty much if you're not at it, you probably want to be at it. And if you are at it, you hopefully are there for fun stuff and not meetings and pitch times galore. I wish I could have been there, but also if I had been there for doing pitches, I probably would have been less inclined.
I've only been twice, and both times it was, my employer was paying me to go, so it was great.
Yeah.
It was just like, I presented once, so I guess technically GDC paid for me to go that time. But like the tickets cost, what, 10 grand or something? Like,
they're insane.
There's no way I would pay that much.
Well, that's like the aggregate. I think the lowest cost one, even with student discount, is like $600, $700. And this is in...
And that's like very few things you get to go to.
Yeah, this is in downtown San Francisco. So if you are
hotel,
you're paying through the nose for your hotel, and if you're not, you are probably making up the difference in the amount of like the transportation costs, Lyfts and Ubers and whatnot. And also, just unless you want to eat constantly at Chipotle.
Who doesn't?
When I was there in 2019, I was like, I need, it's a vibrant city, I should experience some of the food. And I went to a Thai place and had some yellow curry and a Thai iced tea, and they somehow made yellow curry totally tasteless.
But yellow curry is awesome.
Yeah. They somehow failed at it.
Huh.
And it cost me altogether $40 fucking.
Wow. That's the GDC opposite of a discount, whatever that is.
It was nuts. I mean, like, I wouldn't have been able to make it in 2019 if my employer hadn't paid. I'm very grateful for that.
And now without E3, that's like the big place we can go to see people we haven't seen in a long time.
GDC has been more and more and more of a thing in the last 10 years, probably more than that. And with E3 gone now, I wonder what the kind of impact that's going to have for like ticket price and the amount of people who go. But yeah, E3 being gone was a sort of situation where I was like, I thought it was done in 2007 and then it held on. Yeah, 2020 didn't kill it, 2021 didn't kill it. It took 2023 and everybody being like, you know what? Let's just do this sort of thing on our own, and boom, bottom falling out.
Well, when the only way to find out about games was like magazine articles, it made sense to have one event where everybody could come but I mean, now it's like you can release a trailer and it will people will see it, right? Or you could release a demo. Like you couldn't do that unless you physically mailed out a disc with magazines. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, God, I remember that.
Do you remember magazines?
Magazines were a thing.
I barely remember that.
You had physical media on there. We're like, what? Yeah.
And it only came out once a month.
Oh, jeez.
And they would mail it to you. And half of the pages were ads.
Makes us sound like cavemen talking about this. Just like, one time we wrote on walls. God.
The Pony Express would bring it by. It would only take 2 weeks to deliver.
Yeah, but I remember E3 being like, oh, it was a trade show. The whole like, oh, the spirit of the thing. It was there for businesses, big companies like Target and whatnot to be like, what games do you have and how much shelf space we want to give to them? And now that's such an expired kind of concept. And also the cost of making this thing happen is so far surpassed that it's like, it quote unquote lost its way, or it lost the sort of like initial point of it back when it was like E for all and everybody can go, that kind of thing. Like, I would even be like, it's been struggling for some sort of identity and way to, dig its claws in the ground since 2007. And I guess you can say it did it admirably. It was time for it to go. It was the sort of thing where it was like, you need multiple things for an event that scale and that expense to get it to survive.
Especially when nowadays you look at something like the Game Awards, which is 90% trailers, and if they can just barely squeeze in the awards, then they're happy. They're entirely fan focused, right? They're angled at not us.
Yeah.
Right, which is good because that means it has an identity. E3 seemed to not be sure which one it was, right? Like, is it an industry thing, or is it a fan thing, or is it somehow both? And like they never could really figure out where they lay in there. It was like PAX, it's totally a fan thing, right? Industry supported, but it's totally for the fans. GDC, very much an industry thing, but DICE even more so.
Yeah.
It's good to have those other things, but they're not for the same thing that the original E3 was for.
Yeah, I have to wonder if... I doubt it'll be the case, because I hear everybody talking like it's not a new topic about how freaking untenably expensive GDC is. And I know a lot of people were really happy when they went online only and went, see, this is proof that it can work. So they basically went nope and changed their minds about the whole thing and went in person again, which is a bummer, because I wish there was some sort of middle ground where you could buy a reasonable pass and see stuff that was live streamed or something. I think they also have to be like, what is the value that you're getting from all of this? Because even the cheapest ticket just costing $700 or something is insane. And going, what is your use from this?
Does that get you to the talks at least for the 700?
Sometimes.
Some of the talks? Okay.
When I went in 2019, they also have like 50 different fucking passes, so knowing which one to get, I was like, oh crap, I'm lucky enough that my employer's gonna pay for this. For the first time I get to go to this thing. And so trying to pick one was just like, oh, this one seems like the right one. And I get there on a Monday and they're like, nope, you can't go to talks until Wednesday. Which was fine. I hung out at the Indie Mega booth and went to another one upstairs, which actually was the first time I saw the demo for Unpacking. I went with this idea of, I went to as many sessions as I could, and I took notes like a nerdy college student. Like, just like notebook on the knee and just jotting stuff down really thoroughly, looking up at the slides and everything. While most people are just sort of hanging out there with their bag, just like, what is her issue? Like, I was taking notes like a junior, collating them at the end and trying to make some sort of
book report
plan for it. And people are like, why are you going to all these panels? Because that's what money was paid for. I need to prove some sort of worth for that. Like, nobody cares.
So apparently we're going to be having a guest, I guess?
Yeah, we are going to be having a guest.
Is that how this show works?
Yep. That's our format.
As it were.
That's how we're doing.
Yes.
That would be our old friend, Matt MacLean.
Yes.
Whom we worked with back at Obsidian.
You two were on Alpha Protocol, right?
Yes.
I was on the canceled Aliens RPG. But I knew you guys because we would have gatherings all the time over on the Alpha Protocol side of the office and play, what was it? Was it Puzzle Fighter?
Oh god, yeah, it was Puzzle Fighter. We also had a completely legally modded Xbox.
Such as they are.
Which had an insane amount of MAME games on it. Would just part of like the beginning of the evening would be like, what's on here? Just
Let's see.
Pawing through and seeing what insanity. Like, we also played a lot of Super Smash Bros. Melee,
Yeah.
which involved me going into a red haze, not remembering anything that I said.
Except that it was incredibly profane, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
They were some really good, I have to say, some fine examples of improvisational swearing, as I've seen anywhere.
It was a lot of screaming and flailing. I think one time I called somebody playing Link a sword-having motherfucker.
Yeah, I remember that. I think that was against me. Because I always played Link.
Still love you. It's great, though.
No, it was hilarious. Like, did I really say that? It was awesome.
Yeah, I came out of the red haze once and somebody was laughing and had said, yeah, a guy came in here, watched you play for a little bit, looked disturbed and left.
I mean, fair enough, right?
Wow.
Your shit talking skills were so epic. It was good.
I had them honed at my college, which we'd all play the first Super Smash, and I was only considered, in terms of like smack talking, middling at best.
Among my high school friends, when it came to shit talking, it got very subtle after a while. Like, because we all knew the normal shit talking, right? So like one of my friends, the most angry I ever saw him get was after we played a game of Soul Calibur. It was like where the first to win 5, where you'd have to play a bunch of games. And one of my friends lost 4 in a row and then won 5 in a row right after that. Right. And so then my other friend who had just gotten beaten was like, oh, so what? Were you letting me win the whole time? And he wasn't. But my other friend went, yeah. I mean, yeah. All right. And the other guy got so mad he had to leave the house and go for a walk. It was so awesome. But like, it was so subtle, right? It's like, oh, what were you doing? Letting me win the whole time? Yeah. And it wasn't true, but it was enough to totally enrage somebody. So sometimes, less is more.
What games you been playing lately to like center us on our this is a game podcast, right?
Baldur's Gate 2, Shadows of Ohm, weirdly.
Oh, like the classic or the remastered?
The remastered one, but it's still it's the same game. Like you can zoom the map out, but it's the same game.
Nice.
For better or for worse, it's still the same game. It's AD&D 2nd edition, right?
Oh man.
You have to roll your character. Like you have to sit there for 20 minutes hitting the roll button until you get good stats.
Oh, jeez.
Or you go in and hack your character file like everybody did. Because remember, the characters were, you could keep them, you could transfer your save files because they weren't expansions in the sense that like downloadable content is. They were expansions in the sense of they were a whole fuck off other game that you put on a whole fuck off other disc that you would buy completely separately. And maybe you played the first one, maybe you didn't. But if you did, you get to transfer your save file over. And man, like I can't even imagine like doing something like that nowadays, but so old school.
Yeah, that's just like the nature of what is counted as an expansion, what is counted as just downloadable content, when you also like, you don't necessarily have to have something be a physical thing to have it count as a standalone. It's really crazy trying to define those things. It's such a pain to try to determine that. But yeah, jumping back into what led you back in time to Baldur's Gate 2.
I can tell you exactly what it was. So my friend Tony decided it was like time to play some really hard, really old school type stuff.
Ooh.
And he was looking forward to Baldur's Gate 3. And so we got to talking about Baldur's Gate. And then I remembered Minsk and Boo.
Oh,
do you remember Minsk and Boo?
Oh, yeah.
The miniature giant space hamster.
Go for the eyes, Boo.
Go for the eyes, Boo. And I remembered that. And then I thought, oh, wow, I really have to go replay this because it's been a long time. And then I realized I never played Baldur's Gate 2. I only played the first one. So this is a whole new game for me.
Oh, man.
And it's like, I've got like 40 more hours ahead of me. And I haven't done, like I've played for a long time and I haven't done anything yet. And so it's just like, I forgot how crazy these were.
Yeah.
Especially with AD&D 2nd edition, where it's like, I can't use any of my spells because they will hurt my own party.
God, yeah, hopping back to second edition. I'm even like for Neverwinter 2 jumping back to 3.5 would be like, oh man, that's a jump back.
Classic.
But the fact that they're like, nope, you remember this game, you like this game, you deal with it, deal with what Thaco is. Assholes, deal with Thaco.
And negative armor class being better than positive armor class. It's like, yes, I got a +1 to armor. Oh wait, that's bad.
Why plus bad? Why plus bad? I don't understand. Try figuring that shit out when you were 12.
It was a challenge, but we did it.
Yeah.
We lived with it, and we liked it, right?
Yes.
I was happy when 3rd edition came around because that was a lot easier to get your brain around.
Yeah. I played basic for a long time. I almost kind of skipped 2nd, except in the like form of games.
Neverwinter or whatever.
And I didn't play tabletop again until 3rd came around. And then I was making games with 3.5, and translating all that stuff was real interesting.
Yeah, I used to play a ton of Dungeons and Dragons in person too, but 3rd edition definitely made it easier for everybody but to participate in the rules, I have to say.
Yeah.
Like up to that point it was like you would look to the person who knew the rules and they would tell you what happened and then you keep playing. You'd be like, "What happened there?" So because I didn't explicitly say I was attempting to disbelieve that this was an illusion, I'm dead.
Oh god.
Okay. I guess I'm dead then.
I still remember being in this game group for 3rd ed in college, and some ridiculous thing happened, and like 4 people said at the same time, I rolled a disbelief.
Right. Yes.
And that basically became like, anytime anyone was suspected of bullshitting in our group of friends, somebody would look at them skeptically and just be like, I rolled a disbelief.
It was the same thing with our group. It became a meme, and then one time in one game, I was right about to die. The thing was bearing down on me. And as a joke, I said, I attempt to disbelieve, to try to get everybody to laugh. And the GM was like, wait, do you attempt to disbelieve? And I was like, yes, of course I do.
Yes, I totally do. Of course.
Of course I do. And then I won and I didn't die. It was great. You just have to always be skeptical about whether something's real. Yeah, I mean, it's just much better to get passive saving throws, but, it's a story I get to tell now.
Yeah.
What about you?
I knew what this would do to me, so I held off for the longest time, but I finally gave in and I'm playing Persona 5 The Royal expansion.
Oh, so you're romancing all of the things.
I'm very particular about my pairings. I'm just like, oh no, it seems too much like a friend, and the teacher thing is gross, and I also relate way too much to one of the characters, so I was like, romance her! Because somehow that makes sense to like, it throws a bone in it's my brain to like high school Annie.
You're dating high school Annie. That's funny.
Maybe somehow in the past I could be cool enough for like the suave guy to want to date.
The player character.
Somebody as cool as the protagonist. I beat the first one twice. I actually did the New Game Plus, and I lied. Semi-lied to myself when I did that, because I was like, well, for a game as long as Persona 5, what are the bonuses of a New Game Plus? What does it get for you? I've got to go see this for research.
Yeah.
And it's like, bullshit. I just wanted to play it again.
Did you romance different people the second time?
I did. The first time I romanced the doctor, because it was like a hot punk rock doctor. I have to. Her shoes are amazing. And the second time was definitely Makoto, the student class president, the nerd.
Yeah, I usually get the nerd. I usually go after the nerdy ones.
In 3, there's the person in your party where everybody loves Mitsuru. But then there's somebody, I think her name is Chihiro or something, who's a student council person who's really like quiet and kind of nervous. And I was playing that one back in the day. This is 3 on the PS2. Playing that one with my boyfriend, and I was like, no, you have to go for this like sweet bookish one, and her arc was terrible. We got to like 6, and it's like, I don't want to date her anymore, and I'm like, I don't want to either. I feel shitty. She's just so shy. She's not opening up or developing at any point. Which is kind of funny because, like, I was sort of, like, there were some really good social links in 3 and some really just not great ones. It was the first game in which they did them. And then I played the PSP version, which lets you play as a girl, and they redid a lot of the social links, and they are so much better. So much better.
Oh, yeah.
The point where it's like, oh yeah, the PSP version is now available for people to play on modern consoles, and I'm like, play 5 first, or maybe 4, and then go back to 3 to sort of see the genesis of that. Yeah, play as a girl, I'll tell you exactly who you need to romance. Or maybe your heart will tell you.
Like, I taught Mary to play Skyrim,
Ooh.
but I had to sit next to them for like 13 hours and be like, I promise you, underneath this giant pile of shit is cool, delicious water. We just have to scrape the shit away enough and you'll understand it, and then you'll love it and want to keep playing it. And we did. And so then Mary played hundreds of hours of it. But only after that could they go back to Oblivion.
Oh.
Right?
I've kind of wondered about that because I never played Oblivion.
Oh, it's so great, but it doesn't have any of the modern conveniences, right?
Yeah.
So finding the cool, clear water underneath requires a lot more shoveling.
Yeah. But you know how to get to it. You know how to use a divining rod to find the good stuff.
Exactly. You've tasted the water before, right? You know it's worth going there for it, right? It's,
yeah.
You know, you want the truffle. Sure, it's in the, you know, it's in the middle of that pile, but it's gonna be good once you wash it off.
Yeah.
Wow, this metaphor is terrible. I love it.
That's like, if people really love Persona 5, and they should, and they're just like, oh, I want more, I'm like, go to 4. And then if you really love that, then you can step back to 3 when they're, and see the sort of how they were figuring this out and whatnot. And it is super enjoyable. These are always going to be games that take like 100 hours though.
Oh yeah.
And what sort of cinched it for me for playing the Royal at long last was somebody going, it's basically like they made another game and just layered it in. Like, it's so substantial. If I hadn't played the first one so thoroughly twice, I don't think I would have noticed it. And the thing that I'm doing that is incredibly hard for me to do is not looking at any guides.
Oh.
Is just relying on...
What if you do it wrong, though?
Yeah, I know. I've also been like, I'm gonna play this... I'm gonna do the New Game Plus of this motherfucker, too.
Well, then you can't. You can do it right the second time.
I've signed myself up for 200 hours, not just 100. I'm lying, more like 400 fucking hours for both. I know this.
Persona's a long game, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even I let you keep all of your personas that you've unlocked in a New Game Plus. So, like, you're mowing through the starter enemies, like, I brought Satan, smash! So it definitely speeds the beginning of the game way the fuck up. But this is me the first time through, and so I'm like, I'll make some mistakes. I'll rely on getting to know these characters in an honest way and not look at a guide. I'm making this seem like this noble choice, but really, it was like I started playing and I looked at a guide and it was like, well, I already fucked up. I have already ended what would be a perfect run on literally the first goddamn day because I didn't go to this store in Yangon-Jaya and buy this thing that would prepare me for this other thing later.
That's the thing. Always the thing. What if I miss it?
Yeah.
What if I miss it and I can't go get it?
These are such a densely layered game, and now this one has added a whole other game on top of it. I'm like, I want to relax and enjoy how this game plays and enjoy how the characters interact and draw inspiration from this and how unbelievably stylish it is.
Oh yeah.
And not Stardew Valley. At first it's all nice, and then you get really stressed about it. I just want to preserve that it's really nice feeling.
Right.
And not have to constantly be looking at guides on my phone.
To do everything.
Yeah, because it's like, I know enough about this game, and the game itself is clear enough about everything that it's not like I will ever really screw up. I might not get all the points with somebody, and that's like, oh, bummer. But I guess it gives me something to focus on. But yeah, I'm just trying to hang out and enjoy the royal.
It's funny because I just the other night decided I was going to do that with Baldur's Gate 2, like not look up guides anymore. Because I was like, okay, how long is this game? And it was like 60 hours. Okay, how long is, because the Baldur's Gate 2 was 3 expansions. I was like, well, okay, how long was the second game? Oh, like 60 hours. And I'm like, okay, well, how long was the third game? 124 hours. I was just like, okay, I'm not going to get everything. I'm going to speed run these some bitches. And we're just going to have all the characters that make me happy, and the rest can go fuck themselves, and I'll never see their stories. And it's too bad.
Yeah, God, I remember when people started being like, games are so long these days. Who has time? And then coming from a background of doing mostly intensive like RPGs, PC RPGs,
text story based stuff, yeah,
where it's like publishers wouldn't sign you unless you're like, it's like 100-hour story, 200 hours story,
5,000 lines of dialogue.
Just it had to be big. Everything about it had to be big, like to the point where when I was on a panel in like 2015 about classic RPGs, people were trying to, I was like, it's still the genre, still I'm gonna stand by this, the most poorly defined genre out of all game genres.
RPG?
Because it's just mechanics from it. All genres I know I'm like, it's kind of bullshit because they're all mechanics. But the aggregation of mechanics that we've termed RPGs contains the most mechanics, such that they're so distributed now that trying to call something an RPG is no guarantee of any
of it being an RPG.
The only thing that I could find in my brain that made sense was to just be like, they're big. They're either really long or they have a lot of complexity to them or something. The only term I could think of was big. And I said so in 2015. And I'm like, I still don't have a better answer other than big.
But not every big game, and that makes it harder to even answer it, right? Like, yeah, because there's some big games, they're not RPGs really. But all RPGs, games that call themselves RPGs, are really big.
Yeah.
I remember that was the first thing I wanted to make in high school when I was like, I'm going to make a game. I'm like, I'm going to make a role-playing game. And for any of you out there who want to start your first game design project, do not fucking make a role-playing game. It is like literally the hardest thing you can do in a video game. Please pick Pac-Man. That is, or you know what? No, not Pac-Man. Pick Breakout.
Yeah.
Because Pac-Man is also really hard. So, just something easier. Like start with Pong, not with Ultima.
I mean, there's so many like RPG Maker versions now that give you all this stuff to start with.
It does help, yeah.
It's still a lot. Because
you have to write it.
Even if you have the simplest mechanics, then you need to have a lot of content to explore with those mechanics. You need to have a world usually to build stuff on. The most oops-a-daisy, this was a bad assumption for a game, was assuming that because Alpha Protocol was set in basically in modern day or very, very, very near future, that was going to make it easier to deal with. It's like, go outside, there's the world that it's set in. The problem there is you have to then make rules for why you can't do everything that you do in normal life all the time.
Right, because we can't model that.
Yeah. You can't go in every building. You can't just like run up and grab a car. You have much more stringent rules about stuff and how things work. And if you want to use game logic on something that exists in the real world, you have to come up with some new ass excuses for how things work the way that they do.
So I guess we're doing a podcast?
Yeah, oh yeah, we're doing a podcast.
We haven't already recorded it.
Nope.
So we don't know what's going to happen.
Oh yeah.
Except that we know it will be awesome.
Oh, of course. We have all the ingredients for success set up in front of us. A good topic, awesome guests. It's just...
We just have to
It all remains to just get them in the same place and let magic happen.
And this time wait, let me make sure my tenses are right. I won't know what the topic's going to be that we have to defend.
Yep.
Not that I didn't know it and already defended it. It's that I don't know what it's going to be.
Yeah, no idea.
No,
'Tis that time we have made that tweak to defend the mechanic.
Yes.
That now one of us will not know what the question is. And next time, I will be the one who has no clue about things, and I will have to go from being the mastermind to
the puppet.
Seeing these things unfurl.
It was harder than I thought it would be. Wait, my tenses are wrong again. It will be harder than I thought it would be.
Oh, yeah.
No, it was a lot harder to defend a mechanic. Like, Xalavir made it look really easy, but I found it to be difficult.
Oh, yeah.
Last time he made it look very easy, so we'll see how we do.
Yeah, I'm excited about it.
Yes.
We recorded this after.
Oh.
And we will jump back in time to show you this excellent interview that we did with Matt MacLean, who is really fantastic, and we worked with him back in the day, and he was rad then, continues to be rad now, and you'll see/hear all of that goodness when you stay tuned.
Super rad.
Welcome back to FrieNDA. It is time to introduce our very awesome special guest, the fantastic old friend, really rad guy, Matt MacLean. He's been a professional game developer for nearly 20 years. He's a designer, writer, programmer, and now CEO of an indie company which he co-founded, Generic Lake Monster. Matt's worked in a variety of roles, systems level and narrative design, and from QA to project direction, across over a dozen projects, most of them not canceled, including South Park Stick of Truth, Fallout New Vegas, Tyranny, Alpha Protocol, and Neverwinter Nights 2 Mask the Betrayer. These days he's working on the action strategy hybrid Quarterstaff, Generic Lake Monster's debut title, and it's currently available on early access on Steam. Welcome, Matt. Thank you so much for being here.
Yay.
Oh gosh, thank you for having me.
We are super excited to have you here. It is rad to see you again, and I'm really excited to throw this week's Justify week. I'm saying it like I'm actually doing this every week. I don't even know if we can do this every month. Let's just live in a fun fantasy world.
Every so often is, I think, what we're going to say.
Yeah. Every so often. This episode's Justify the Mechanic. We see pop up in games again and again, which have a sort of, let's just say, negative reputation. People are not fans of them, but yet these things keep coming back. So ostensibly, they serve some sort of purpose. So our goal with Justify the Mechanic is to pick one of those mechanics and throw it out like good old speech and debate and make our esteemed guests defend it and say why it is good.
And this time I don't know what the topic's going to be, so I'm also on the defending end of this one.
Yep, I'm so excited. It is my turn. Next time, I will be the one who is in the dark. So, Matt, if you are ready for me to throw this topic out at you, I shall begin.
Oh gosh, I was born ready.
Oh yeah.
Let's do it.
With this time's Justify the Mechanic, which is item degradation.
Oh.
Oh yeah, you think I was gonna go easy? You think I was gonna go light on this one? With Breath of the Wild's sequel, Tears of the Kingdom, coming up, I had to do it. It is that fun mechanic where you get this weapon you really like, and it is super great, and it kicks the crap out of people, and you just love swinging around, you fighting some powerful guy, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna show you what for. And you smack him with the weapon, and things are going great, and then that asshole breaks right on you, and you have to scramble through your inventory if you are lucky enough and can do this for whatever stick or leaf or sad replacement you have to attempt to beat this guy now and hope that you are not totally screwed. But Matt, why is this good?
Oh gosh, okay, it's good because designers are lazy. Oh, I defend this thing, right? I have to defend it, so I have to kind of explain, like, maybe why it exists, and, like, I'm not trying to say it's good, just trying to suggest why we live with this blight in our games.
Let's modify it with positive or hasn't used.
Right? Oh, you're right. Yeah. This.
I enjoy this so much when this shit happens to me. Oh boy.
It's this bit of forced exercise placed upon us. Is that a better positive spin? Okay, so I feel like this was born out of two genres of games, like the Diablo slot machine, massively single-player experience, where the game is just so random, giving you stuff, that it needed to have a system to pull that stuff away from you to get you ever excited to grab more stuff. So, that like durability mechanic, I guess, makes you feel like everything is fleeting and you only have so much time with your ruby longbow of the whale. And someday it's going to degrade and you need to get something new. The other place you see this is like in MMOs where they need gold sinks, right? There's always trees to cut down and animals to harvest. You almost have to have this degradation, otherwise players run out of things to spend their money on. And it almost makes sense in an MMO because like you just got to have a gold sink. They're usually built on these kind of like infinite wells of coins existing in the monsters, right? So, like, I get it in an MMO, especially because in an MMO space, by creating the degradation, you create someone who, like, steps up and says, oh, I solve item degradation. At least in, like, Ultima Online, it made sense to have some idiot go slay the dragon, the other idiot to be like, well, let me forge that. Sorry, idiot. So, killing the dragon could go kill the dragon, and then the person who is the savant at forging the thing could fix the weapons afterwards. It created a cool, like, group dynamic. So, like, in an MMO, I can almost get that, but man, in a single-player game, I feel like it was with us to create gameplay, but oh gosh, I'm supposed to say positive things. So yeah,
You don't have to be positive. You just have to, defend it. That's all.
Yeah, okay, so...
Positive isn't necessary. Just no talking shit.
Yes, so it adds hours of gameplay to a game with random loot.
There we go.
As you spend those hours finding replacement loot.
Yeah.
Yay.
Okay, I got a sideways take on this one.
Okay.
Because I hated the weapons breaking, and I just want to point this out in Breath of the Wild. Like, I really hated that. It's basically the weapons in Halo, right? Mm-hmm. You pick up the weapon, use it till it runs out of ammo.
The Covenant weapons.
And then you throw it away. It's the same basic thing, and I didn't mind it in Halo.
Right.
It was pretty good as an alternative for the weapons you could actually reload. Mm-hmm. That's all I got, though. I need to do better than that. We can't make a whole podcast based on that.
Well, but see, I think it could be interesting if used in better ways. Like, you would think a weapon degrades more when you're parrying, using it to parry big attacks, right? Mm-hmm. But not weeding through, like, trash mobs. Hit an armored opponent, you would think that would degrade the durability of your sword more than an unarmored opponent. I rarely see them durability mechanics used in a way that lets the player treat their weapon nicely and see less degradation. Mm-hmm. Mind you, that's kind of like a really like nuanced thing. Like, you really try in the middle of a battle, player's gonna be like, oh, I don't want to do 2 durability loss versus 1 durability loss this move. Like, I get why they aren't that granular. But if you're gonna make a punishment mechanic, you should kind of make it interesting, and that's what item degradation is. It's sort of a punishment mechanic, let's face it.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you're enjoying the thing, but you got to replace it later.
Do you think that it would be, because you mentioned granularity, and I think a lot of the times where it stood out the most, pain in the ass of Breath of the Wild was the example of you're right in the middle of a fight with a guardian and your goddamn axe breaks. I have been there.
And all you've got is a stick.
Then you're just smacking that asshole with a stick.
Yeah.
Or running around the arena, just, please run into my bombs. Because we all been there. I think anybody who's played Breath of the Wild. But if you have an opportunity to go more granular, to make that be an actual consideration, like in a turn-based situation, could you see that kind of durability risk being a positive gameplay mechanic?
Yeah, because at least, I mean, any game of like, just say like Magic the Gathering, you have resources that are like the cards in your hands. Your life is also a resource too. Yeah. Like, if you can sacrifice 5 life to do 10 damage to the opponent, you're usually going to take that calculated risk. And so, yeah, in a turn-based game, durability could just be another one of those resources that you use. Like, oh, do I want to do this big attack that, wears down my bow? Like, arrows are in some ways the best kind of durability mechanic, because it makes sense. I can keep using my bow until I run out of arrows and I gotta buy more arrows. And at least then it's like, it is really just a durability mechanic, but given a layer that doesn't feel so like just depressing. Oh, I liked this item and it broke, because people get into their gear. They like their big silly shoulder pads. Sorry, their cool aesthetic armored shoulder pads.
Bigger is better. And spikes look rad forever, right?
Oh gosh, and then we all end up making the same looking game.
I don't know. If I were a monster and someone with huge shoulders coming at me, I'd be pretty afraid, right?
I feel like I would just circle strafe around to their side where they would have these blind spots created by the large pauldrons that have like gargoyles holding candles, reading books. But I guess the other question is like, what happens when your durability fails?
Yeah.
It's like you had that interesting point about in Breath of the Wild, like fighting with a broken weapon is kind of a pain in the ass, and it doesn't have to be. I remember Ocarina of Time had that giant knife. It was like a two-handed sword that Link could swing around, and then you'd hit like 6 things with it and it would break, and it suddenly became like a broken sword you were swinging around. You were still allowed to use it, and it almost had you're still better off switching to your old sword, but at least it like let you do something where like, hey, now the broken blade is just a different weapon. And I feel like if you did things with that, you could make an interesting game. You almost don't even need a durability mechanic so much as a decision to have things break down. It's not necessarily the greatest game ever, but I think Far Cry as a series is always into this kind of idea of like improvisational gameplay versus, say, Splinter Cell that they're making at the same studio, which is all about intentional gameplay. I think Far Cry 2 really embraced it with the idea of like, oh, there might be a wildfire, your weapon might jam, and you might get attacked by malaria. And the gameplay itself isn't too novel. It's a first-person shooter, but kind of the idea was like, we'll throw things at you that will like complicate these normal situations. And there was a game where like, hey, your gun breaking was kind of cool because it had this special reload animation as you're trying to unjam it, and it could turn a situation exciting almost because there wasn't a durability meter, but just this game knew that every once in a while it's going to throw a monkey wrench at you and you have to figure it out. And that was in some ways better than seeing a durability mechanic on my gun.
Yeah, it's interesting because depending on the creative agenda of the game, maybe a game wants you to feel bad. And that's a good reason to use item degradation. I'll give you an example. Resident Evil.
Yeah.
Right? The fact that I couldn't use all my weapons all the time was good because it scared the shit out of me, and it made me not want to use my bullets because there might be some giant ass dog who runs out, right?
Absolutely.
So in the context of that agenda, it makes sense. It doesn't feel good, but the game's not trying to make you feel good, so it doesn't feel at cross purposes.
That actually kind of brings up another potentially connected kind of situation. Like, I know that one of the things that they said for Breath of the Wild was in this game where you can just pick up all kinds of shit. It was supposed to try to, at least as I have heard, get you to try new stuff. That is an honorable intention. But then having situations where stuff is totally taken away from you, you get attached to it. You have enough time to get attached to it. So I'm wondering situations where it also leads to another downside, which is item hoarding.
Potion problem.
Like, I am that person who, in every RPG, is like, I don't want to use the ethers.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just save or something. And then by the time I run into the last boss, I have 20,000 of the damn things and I'm still not excited about using them. Like, well, what if it has other forms?
Right, you never know when you've seen the final ogre form.
Oh, yeah.
Right, and so it's like, is it really safe to bust out the mega elixirs? No, not until it's like looking like a weird Sistine Chapel painting of a monster, and then like, maybe. Maybe.
Yeah, then maybe its dad shows up and you're like, God damn it.
Right, yeah.
That uncertainty. Like, uncertainty as good, uncertainty as bad. You can play around this a whole lot. Game development.
The giant fresco thing. I'm not gonna stop laughing about that for a while. It's like if you put the game on the Sistine Chapel, that's how you know you're at the final boss. The boss's final form.
It's the Pope.
Final Fantasy has taught us this.
Oh God.
But yeah, another thing, now I'm thinking about what circumstances could that be? What kind of games would want you to feel bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you can think of this as a tool for, I want my players to feel bad. And that's not the wrong thing always, right? Like, what if you want them to feel scarcity to an extreme degree? You're making a survival game, and there's only a certain number of things on this island, and you want people to feel like everything matters. Every piece of gear they get is a unique treasure that must be hoarded. And yes, that gun with 3 bullets in it, you're probably going to fire it at some point, but not till you need to, until you find the crazy cult that's living underground in the caves, right? Like, you feel really vulnerable, and that's a bad way to feel. But also, like, that's sort of what entertainment is, right? Is it's making you feel things that you're not normally accustomed to feel in a safe way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I will say, actually, like, I can think of a game that used item durability really well, Neo Scavenger. Because there was I guess there were technically ways to trade in some weird tangential ways. Mostly the game was about, ooh, cool, I found a plastic bag to hold my gear in, but that plastic bag's about to break soon. Okay, let me grab this other container that still has more durability on it. Like, in the absence of a coin economy, and it's in a scavenger economy game, you almost need that durability. Otherwise, the scavenger gameplay ends the minute you find the binoculars you need, the crowbar you need, the gun you need. I mean, I guess you need to keep finding the bullets, but when you layer durability on top of ammunition needs, you're saying both like, oh yeah, you can keep using this gun until you run out of bullets, but even if you keep finding more bullets, the gun itself is going to wear down. And yeah, if you don't have a way of using, or if currency isn't how the player is getting items, you almost need to put time limits on these things to get them to be part of the survival stress.
Because the second you have that thing you can rely on, the second it starts eroding this core feeling that the game wants you to keep with you. We dealt with that in Dead State of like the second people had a shelter that was running extremely well, like a lot of the difficulty of it kind of dropped off, and going out in the field wasn't a scary risk. We had set up systems that I think we planned too well. We went, this will actually make for a good self-sustaining fortress, turning your shelter basically into that. And absent of those needs, you didn't really have an impetus to go out and look for stuff. Like, we had set up this morale mechanic that it was a constant drain, but not aggressively enough, and had less reasons to push you out to where it was dangerous. One of the things that I think about that's interesting about the Breath of the Wild example, because we have the fortunate thing of actually having heard a designer go, well, this is why. It strikes me as one of those situations where you have a very good design intention, and you take what seems like a very reasonable path towards achieving that. Like, well, we want people to try a bunch of different stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And see, maybe they actually like a faster weapon rather than something that swings really slow and does a bunch of damage. But the result of that became shaped into something that kind of actually ran counter to what they wanted, which was people tried something different, actually found something that they liked, but then they couldn't keep it. It's like, well, I'm glad you like that axe, and now it's gone. I've seen multiple situations, and like, this just stands out the most. Oh, I'll take this practical method to just, oh, of course you do this to solve this game design problem. And then the game itself is like, nope! Nope, it's not working that way.
I think, there are always like game economy reasons for doing this. And it also benefits from being a game action that you as a player understand. Like, you understand fixing things or things breaking down. But I guess it's like one of those things that's like, I am aware of paying the rent in real life. I don't want to play a video game wherein I pay rent. And so it's like, yeah, I get items breaking down, but like, is that a core fantasy that I want to live out? I mean, you can argue some people don't want to like shoot people in the head, so okay, that's probably why the first person shooters aren't for everything. Even though it is an action that players can understand, it's like, yeah, I guess you could make cleaning your room a game mechanic, but like, why? It's just not something that I think the player has fun doing, and it's like, it's not fun to have forgotten it. It's not fun to have something broken because like, oh, I didn't check my reminder that my item durability was low. It's the sort of thing that when you fail it, it's like, man, if I want to be like punished for forgetting something, I can do that in real life. You don't play a game to like get your car's brakes checked, unless you're playing Gran Turismo, but that's part of the game playing Gran Turismo.
It needs to be in service of something that the player expects.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different ways to solve this gameplay one. It feels like you have to commit to one of, like, you can't sort of have that middle way of like, this is just a system we're just going to put in. You have to either go really granular with it, as mentioned before, like be able to make more, you have more control over the decisions that you make moment to moment to have durability be an understood and really transparent resource. Past the point of like, oh, there's a little bar on this thing and it's, you know, getting to a certain point, but getting really like dang near hit points or something like that. Question of permanence, is this gone forever or is this just like a temporary, I can't use this? I also really like the example of, oh yeah, you have this big badass item that you can use for this temporary amount of time, and it is neat and it changes gameplay in a particular amount of time, like not necessarily to the degree of invincibility, but it's a star from Mario. It is, here is something that makes you extra powerful for a while, changes how you play the game a little bit, but is not meant to be permanent and the player knows that. How do you communicate that? Where do you put that kind of thing so that players aren't like, oh, I'm just going to get this win thing all the time. Why would I play the game any other way?
There's part of the reason for doing the Breath of the Wild system you said was like encouraging people to do other things. That's like one way you could encourage people to do other things. But you ever see that talk by Bill Roper on using carrots instead of sticks and how they did it in Diablo?
There's a million different ways to get the player to switch weapons, like have enemies that are weaker to a different weapon, or like, it is in some ways making a weapon fall apart is kind of the lamest game design tool to get you to try variety. Throw better challenges at the player. Don't just say like, oh, you're only allowed to use a solution X many times before it breaks and you have to find a new solution.
Absent some kind of compelling feeling that you're trying to produce in a player, I would usually want to give you bonuses rather than negatives. Like when WoW came out in beta, they had a thing where the longer you played, the less XP you got. And then when you stopped playing, it would go back up to normal. And everyone hated it. And they switched the math.
Yeah.
So it was exactly the same system. But, backwards, you get a bonus by, logging out. Sometimes that's all it takes to turn something from feeling bad to not feeling bad. And it isn't a difference in the gameplay. It's just a difference in how the player perceives it.
Yeah.
So maybe there's some way of doing it from the other side where I get bonuses for switching weapons more often somehow. And the trick would be making that really clear and understandable to the player what kind of bonuses they would get. But it's, you'd have to do a bunch of work, but it's possible.
Yeah. Like I've seen situations where people try to do that, but the balance is such that like, oh yeah, I'm going to give these bonuses for this thing and then it's normal. But if there's an element of randomization to that completely fucks with things because of how people perceive that. And trying to be like, no, this doesn't work in this kind of situation because humans are weird and we're negative creatures. And instead of seeing this when they get something positive as a neat benefit, they see when they don't get it, this being this negative thing that's happening to them. And I mean, that's such a wiggly thing. Like, that's one of those game design principles where it's like, forever in my head, it's like the definition of pornography. I'll know it when I see it kind of thing. Like, I don't have a rule in mind other than the randomness where this concept of perception, you can't tweak it. You run up against a wall on that. It's like the magic of patch notes saying that, oh, I haven't lowered this. I've adjusted it or normalized it. It's like the victory of the English major. Just tweaking how you phrase it. But those situations where phraseology is not going to help you because you get this gut perception that players have where the gig is up, can't really fool them into this is the way this is going to work.
I thought while we were talking, we actually solved that problem in Ratchet in a weird way. We made it so that you could upgrade your weapons and then they would max out. And so people would switch to another weapon so they could upgrade that weapon all the way.
Yes.
Oh, nice.
And so there's a lot of people not using their favorite weapons because, oh, well, I want to get XP on a different weapon, which is kind of a weird way. Like, you wouldn't necessarily think, like, let them make this thing great, and then maybe they won't want to use it anymore.
Oh my god, you're saying that, and I'm remembering that I did that.
Yeah.
100%. That is exactly how I was like, oh man, I really love this one. And I would sometimes even pick a weapon that I was like, I fucking hate this one, but like, I can see how it would get better. And I'm a completionist and I want them all to be good. So just trying to even like find certain gameplay situations in which this weapon excelled, seeking them out directly and being like, okay, buddy, it's your time to shine.
And what I like about that, that's reverse durability, right?
Yeah.
Instead of making the player like afraid of using the item because every time they use it, they're like pulling away from some finite times to use this item. Instead, you're saying like, no, there's only a finite number of times to use this item at level 1, then it's going to get better. You're actually doing it the other way around where you're encouraging players to use their tools. So as I said earlier, like absence of certain feeling you're trying to get in the player. I'm going to say, go out here on a limb and say it's bad design because like that feeling you're always going to give the player is fear of using their items, uncertainty about using their items, a sense that they might even be like, oh, I think this is the right time to use the item, but maybe I'll save it for later. And like once you've kind of created that counter incentive for the player to, you're counter incentivizing them using the tools you programmed for them. Why?
We're going hard after Breath of the Wild here.
I loved Breath of the Wild. I just want to point that out. I loved that game.
Yeah, me too.
Like, I just didn't like that my weapons went away. but I loved it.
Yeah. I leaned really hard toward anything that I bought was like, it's a weapon slot. I'm buying more weapon slots because I just want to hoard these. And I had areas in which it was kind of weird. I'd get a new cool weapon and be like, is it cooler than this one? And try to keep some crap weapons on hand just for certain situations where they were almost more like tools. And I almost wish there was just a separate category of tools, of like crap you just keep around because you need to row a boat or something like that. So switching from going after Breath to going after Diablo or MMOs, like a more limited kind of concept of item durability, which is your weapons and armor. Armor gets involved in this too. It gets fucked up when you die.
So the one thing is inflation, right?
Yeah.
Every monster pops gold, right? Buying things from other players does not remove that gold from the environment. The only thing that removes it is when they spend it at vendors, because nobody gets it. You're deleting that gold. And you need somewhere to delete that so that the gold doesn't lose its value. It was like Diablo 2, they had a problem where you could clone these items called Stones of Jordan.
Oh, the old Stones of Jordan problem.
Yeah. And you could clone them to the degree that they became the new currency in the game. Like everyone was trading things for Stones of Jordan instead of for, gold or whatever else. And the way they removed that is fucking genius. So they put in a thing where every time someone would vendor a certain number of Stones of Jordan, like on a server or whatever, Uber Diablo would spawn. And you could kill Uber Diablo and get a special unique item. But in order to get that one item, which you could then only have one of because they fixed the cloning problem, they would have to throw in a ton of Stones of Jordan. And eventually they got rare again, and people would be like, oh, I've only got a few Stones of Jordan. I might need to spawn Uber Diablo. I don't know if I want to trade these right now. They managed to save the currency by giving you a sink for it to take it out of the economy that everybody liked and felt good about. So yeah, it was just kind of an interesting way of solving that problem, but also illustrates, I think, why you need that kind of a sink. And maybe durability is not the best way to do it, but it works.
I mean, yeah, like what else are you going to do? Like, again, charge the player rent or like a poll tax? Yeah, inter-player trade doesn't actually help your economy in some ways. It's cool. It's a great thing that happens, but yeah, you absolutely need NPC vendors or a death tax that, like, when you die, you are charged money, even if not right away, but you have to go to the vendors who are, take the money out of the system.
Or like in WoW, the auction house takes a cut of everything you sell on the auction house. Yeah.
Yeah, you need something. And it sounds sort of odious to the players, but it's like, well, do you really want a system that doesn't have a gold sink? Because you're not going to like the prices of things after a few months if you don't have these things. They may seem kind of like, why is this game like that? It's like, well, just because in the long run, this is how the numbers have to make sense.
So if we attack the idea of a death tax, does that seem like in a situation where it's the... I hate this term in most usages, but for games, it's like this applies. A slippery slope in a sort of situation where if you're dying a lot, you're losing a bunch of money, and so you keep losing, and it's harder and harder for you to succeed. And if you're succeeding, if you're good at the game, then you just keep accruing more and more money, and theoretically breaking the economy more and more because you can buy everything.
In a single-player game, I think it's a disastrous set of designs where it's like, oh, you made a mistake, let's make it even harder for you to succeed the next time. I think in an MMO, it is a punishing system that when you're down, it is keeping you down. But in some ways, MMOs have that advantage of like, well, you can find a group, you can find other players to subsidize your failures. And in some ways, the MMO landscape is always, you're allowed to hang out in an under-leveled area and grind in just about any MMO I've ever played, right? So you're kind of deciding when to die in an MMO. You're usually volunteering to go on the raid or go into the dungeon. You're leaving the safety of the town, right? Where in a single player game, sometimes you only have like the next boss is just the next thing to fight.
Yeah.
And if you get punished every time it kills you, you're just going to get more and more frustrated every time. But in an MMO, I can almost see the reason for it existing. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, it punishes you when you're down, but you're not alone theoretically in an MMO. At least it's designed as if you're not alone.
So content mitigation basically being like, there's enough other stuff to do.
Yeah.
Where if you're on this kind of slope, step on back.
Yeah.
Take it a little easy. Kill some spiders for a bit.
Yeah.
Oh, and if you accept, and I don't necessarily, but if you accept that there needs to be a penalty for dying so that people care, there's definitely way worse ways to do that, right? Like take, for example, EverQuest or MUDs, right? Where the penalty for dying was not only do you have to run back to your corpse, but you need to get there before the players rob your body.
Yes.
And take all of your shit.
Oh, God.
And so by comparison, right, going to your items take a little bit of damage and you got to pay some gold to repair. Like that was a huge step up in quality of life.
Yeah.
But now seems kind of harsh.
I've seen in Guild Wars 2, that was a thing. Or I should say, it still is a thing. Your stuff does break, but it doesn't cost any money to repair it. You just need to get, first it was like to go to a certain vendor that could, and now it's just find an anvil, run over and repair it yourself, which had this interesting function of not taking money away from you, but pulling you back to a certain area. Essentially, I mean, they didn't put anvils and stuff out in the middle of nowhere. They put them in areas that were, protected and there were NPCs there and so on. So it was kind of like to yank you back to civilization, to a kind of safe spot, which was usually right by where you would be respawning anyway. So to just sort of recenter you and almost force you to kind of reprioritize things. Like it essentially gives you a little bit of busy work.
That anvil mechanic though is cool though, because almost every game, when you die or make a mistake, it's measured in how much time is it asking you to spend to make up for your mistake, right? And like in any MMO, I guess you could look at like, well, if I go on this particular dungeon, I can farm X thousands of gold pieces per hour. Like, okay, then if you get lost 5,000 from dying, you could put a time cost on what that death meant to you. And I think just making it the anvil just says it's simply like, okay, we want you to take a breather because maybe you're just hitting your head against a problem. So you step away, have a nominal time cost, which almost every game has, like some nominal time cost. Hopefully it's not watching that unskippable cutscene again. But there's usually some nominal time cost of dying, and why not just take the gold cost away and just say like, hey player, do this simple exercise, circle back to your friends, have a chance to step out of that situation where you were getting beaten and rethink your options, try again. I think that's good fault tolerance.
Especially if the thing that you're making the player do that costs time is one of the things that's great about your game. So like in an MMO, going back to town makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Because that's where you'll go run into other people, which is one of the big strengths of your game. So Guild Wars too, right? Like it would be the same. You're running into other people that might spark things that are good in terms of playing it.
Yeah.
And so it makes me wonder, like, is there something you could do that would make dying cool? Like there was that game Sifu where like when you died, you got more powerful because it made you older, but eventually you die. Like there's got to be some way of being like, okay, I died. That's interesting now.
Yeah, I thought, what was that orc murder simulator game?
You're going to have to be more specific.
No.
Do you have any idea how little that narrows it down?
The Lord of the Rings, Shadow of Mordor.
Yes.
Oh, that is very much. Or killing and befriending, or rather enslaving, and we'll not get into that too much. We'll just say befriending.
Well, yeah, they give you points for dying, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. It's a single-player game.
Yeah.
You're spending your time on it, and all your time in that game should turn into something. And I think it's a brilliant move, though, to just say, hey, you died, you get more power points. They had like some XP for your ranger skills and like power points for your elf skills or whatever. And dying actually gave you those like spirit powers. Like, that's freaking cool. And as you play the game more, you learn that, if a specific named orc kills you, he gets a little promotion, which makes him like more of a loot pinata when you defeat him. So you can actually sort of like fatten the orcs for Thanksgiving by letting them kill you. And I thought that was quite brilliant.
Yeah.
They made dying like kind of a way to gain power, because that was in the rules of the game, is that you're this immortal pseudo ring wraith. Go ahead and die. And in some ways, they weren't trying to like encourage you to do a perfect run where you never die. Like, screw the perfectionism gameplay. Let's actually say like, no, go ahead, die. It's fun. Mm-hmm. And I haven't seen a lot of games make dying as fun as Shadow of Mordor made dying.
It's a really good example.
I think that mechanically, that makes me feel like that's taking a page out of roguelikes.
Yeah.
A roguelite book. I should say specifically roguelite.
Yes.
Because likes or roguey games are ones where it's just, well, that's it. What you take with you is player based. Like, it's your knowledge of what stuff does.
Like Rogue.
Yeah, like maybe you'll unlock something new, but it, it won't do you any good right now at this moment. Versus something like Hades, where, well, you died, but you got shit while you were out there. So now use that stuff to make yourself better, so you'll be less likely to die. But even if you do all these things. So it's interesting, like looking at this mechanic, it's something that splits into more ways to tackle than might meet the eye. Like it's in terms of like a death penalty, it's like it was good as means to an end. But when it comes to, should we say like passive or active degradation, is it too nerdy for me trying to make it just death degradation and life degradation?
Go for it.
Where it's like you either really need to get granular with it and accept it as like, this is one of the things of the nature of the world, and you know what you're getting into with every swing. Theoretically, that's best used in something like, the right tool for the right kind of job.
Yeah.
Like this could work definitely well in a turn-based kind of game, or one where you're not flailing around and you can make more distinct choices with every hit. Like maybe light attacks don't really hurt this thing, but heavy attacks are super useful and will beat this thing to hell. Or situations where it's like, this is fun and ephemeral, enjoy it while it lasts.
Or someone should just make a game where it has a durability system, but you can also buy insurance on things. And then do kind of like an insurance fraud where you like keep getting your like sweet katanas insured, and then like, oh, I broke them fighting another stone golem. And you declare the katana's worth way more than you actually bought it for. Like, if a game could do like insurance fraud on top of durability, then I would be down for playing that game.
That's the real sexy stuff that you want to see out of video games, I think, is insurance, for sure.
Sweet insurance fraud. Oh god, imagine how disappointing it would be to have like a Resettier type game where instead of running an item shop, you were
The insurance.
adventurer insurance.
So you just kept showing up in mountain bases and looking at scores of bodies and being like, oh my god, we should have charged them more for their insurance,
Wait, are you going on an escort quest?
Escort
We
quest.
don't insure NPCs that need to be escorted somewhere. We know the risks involved.
So you were hit by a fireball?
Do they have red shirts on? Definitely not.
I think that's an actual act of God. Like, you got a god mad at you.
Because you have to escort something? Yeah. That's one. That's for a future episode, escort quests.
Oh.
Please write that down.
Oh, yeah, for real. If I don't have it in my list already, it's going in there today.
One interesting thing, since we're talking about Shadow of Mordor, I think this applies. That works in Shadow of Mordor because they built the whole experience around making sure the player understands everything that's happening, right? Like, you kill that orc, he makes a speech. You see an item spawn, you see him.
Yeah.
They do all of the exhausting work of communicating everything in a way that the player can understand. And when I saw that they were doing this system, I thought, this is impossible. How can they possibly make the players understand what's happening? They're turning numbers around behind the scenes, and they're trying to make it compelling. And then they did. They did the work.
They gave you like a force org chart that had these like orc promotions. And if you had told me like our game has an orc force org chart, I've been like, really? But it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant.
It really is.
You're right. It's a very obtuse mechanic that makes certain bold decisions about, like, yeah, the camera will keep rolling after you're dead to let your enemy gloat over beating you.
Yeah.
And you like it because you know that enemy just got like a little like gold banner stuck on his head. We're like, now I'm going to drop legendary loot when you get your vengeance.
Yep.
Laugh while you can, spiky boy.
Yeah.
But having a weapon that breaks after a certain number of hits is way easier to explain, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Which may not mean it's the best mechanic, but it does mean that like at least people understand what's going on. Whereas doing the opposite, I think you would need to spend a lot of time and money communicating to the player what's going on. Or even if you wanted to use durability like hit points or whatever, there's a lot of communication to understand like what that trade-off is. So maybe that's why people don't do it very often.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah.
It's a lot easier to just put in something that is like, oh, well, this will cost you, and then that's that.
Well, we're always looking for intuitive wins, right? We always have enough, with any video game, we, developers, designers, are introducing enough hopefully, enough novel weirdness that we're already trying to tutorialize you on, whatever the story is or the special mechanics are. Like, we're always looking for the things that we don't have to explain. So it makes sense that durability is one of those things like, like, we can put a durability system in, we have time for that. But yeah, you do have time for it.
Yeah.
And it will make sense to lots of players. Will it improve the game? I don't know. But it will certainly be something you don't have to explain much beyond items have durability. They'll break over time. Got it.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of like the argument about why to put it in, like we wanted people to try different stuff. That worked. It did. You did it because you had to. Players who were going to do it anyway did it anyway. And it definitely put the lever towards players who didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But I've heard still that's the most disliked mechanic that I can hear from anybody who has played that game. So it's like, you did your job, but was there maybe a better way to achieve this kind of thing? Because it is not an isolated problem, as we've seen in games, to have this kind of, we have all this cool stuff. We want players to see all this cool stuff.
Yeah.
It's definitely using the stick, sometimes literally, instead of the carrot.
This reminds me of something Zalavir said, right? Where when he sees an unskippable cutscene, or maybe you said this, Annie, like you realize that just off screen, there's a pile of dead bodies that this cutscene had to cover up, right? Like there was some sort of tragedy happening. We needed to solve it. We didn't necessarily have the best way of solving it, but we had this much time to do it, and this is what we could do. Like you said, it's cheap to do durability, you know? So maybe that was something where it's like, we need to solve this problem. We need to solve it now, and it needs to be cheap. Okay, durability. Like, let's do that. Let's try to do it in a way that, like Breath of the Wild did, it's not the most horrible thing.
Yeah.
It's probably the most horrible thing about Breath of the Wild, but they do it well enough that it didn't mean I didn't love that game. It just meant I was really upset that all my weapons were breaking.
Yeah, it was nice that as a consolation prize, when you knew a weapon was about to break, you could just say, fuck it, and yeet it at an enemy.
Sorry, AJ.
You mentioned the Halo example, like if you could just, you finished with this and just whip it at an elite, that would be very funny. Like, I do appreciate that Breath of the Wild is just like, there's gonna be moments in here that are just fucking stupid and funny.
And see, there they could be doing something interesting. Like, I think you've all probably heard about how, like, the final bullet in your chamber in Half-Life does more damage.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Right? Yeah. And it should be that, like, a really great item that's just about to die, if you eat it at someone, should do epic damage, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's the very last thing you throw at someone that explodes dramatically, but yeah.
Yeah, like a laser gun or something.
Yeah, there you go, yeah.
It's getting overheating. Oh man, you could even do overheating as a mechanic. Throw it and it blows up. Like, I think as we've established, it's like, this is not a mechanic that is inherently bad. It's all about, with so many, it's all about implementation. It's finger quotes quick. It's very easy for players to understand. It's not a hard one to explain. But if it only serves a sort of singular purpose, it has to be gentle.
But to Mike, I want to go back to Mike's point. He made a really good point earlier that, like, there are certain games for which this is the feeling that you absolutely need for your game, right?
Yeah.
Because your player verbs become like a button you're allowed to just press forever, to a button that you have to think about every single time you press it. Like, you're not allowed to make wasted moves. And for some games, that is especially survival games, that is kind of what you have to do.
That brings it definitely back to that kind of, if you do this properly, an element of you should do this is either you need to be like, this is random and goofy, and you understand it's ephemeral, or this is granular enough, and the world itself reinforces it, that it doesn't seem like something that's just sort of stapled on there because we want you to use more shit, but that this is a world of scarcity, and you have to be very aware of what's available. If something's very useful, when do you want to use it versus hold on to it? And the idea that it's different than those aforementioned ethers that you're holding on to, because it's not just a one-time good kind of thing. Ideally, you're allowed enough time to experience its utility, to both value it and kind of have a fear of it.
Yeah.
Because you're worried about this good thing being gone, and are you using it wisely? That's like kind of a constant heavy weight. You can't just drop that shit in willy-nilly.
Yeah, like it's not really something you want in a Lego game.
Yeah.
Right? It's not appropriate for that kind of game.
You only have so many bricks, Mike. Only so many.
But then you can pick them back up and reassemble them, right? Right?
Nope, you've glued them. You've glued them in place. You don't have one of those little things that gets rid of them.
Oh, you bought it on Etsy and someone glued it together.
After saying all this, I feel like I would play like a Arkham Retirement, like old Batman, who's about to die. He's really injured, and so it's like your arms and your knees have durability. And like, sure, you can do these cool counterattacks and these moves, but like your knees, you only have so many knee points and elbow points left over.
Oh my god.
And so you're like the last days of Bruce Wayne and just trying to like beat as many bad guys up with you can before you're in traction for the rest of your life. I would play.
I'd play it.
If you did that in something like, oh god, what was that sprinting game, like Nip or something?
Are you thinking Floppy, the game where you have to sprint using like a keystroke for each muscle in your leg?
Yep, and just thinking of that as Bruce Wayne is flailing around.
It's Octodad at that point. Like once you break something, it turns into Octodad. You're just stumbling all over the place.
Bruce Wayne is Octodad.
So I hope a big publisher sees this video and makes me the old Batman game I want to play. So
Oh god.
Yay. They can have that idea for free as long as I get to play it.
Exactly.
We're generous here at FrieNDA. Yep. Our kindness knows, I would say no bounds, but there's probably some durability there.
A couple bounds. Oh, I see what you did
well
there.
done.
The durability runs out on the thing. Okay. So is that the bow? Did we just tie a bow on it?
I think that's the bow. I didn't necessarily mean to make the bow, but there it is.
Sometimes bows happen.
Yeah, they do.
So Matt, why don't you pitch something?
Yeah.
You've got game coming.
Oh.
Yes, tell us of game.
Tell us about it.
Okay, so.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Sorry, not sorry.
Me and the team over at Generic Lake Monster, we have out in early access a little game called Quarterstaff. It is an action strategy hybrid. It's sort of an action game for folks who can't normally play action titles, whether they are just too busy or lack the hand-eye coordination to deal with most action games. So for a lot of folks, they say it looks like a strategy game, but it's one that could play as quickly as an action game if you wanted to. It's the first game I've ever programmed. We did it all in Elm, which is a functional language. Kind of built our own tools, and yeah, we're more or less code complete. We're throwing in art and animation and hurtling towards our end of June full release date. But yeah, you can play it right now on Steam in early access.
At the very least, go wishlist it.
Yeah.
Yes, at the very least, go wishlist, please. Yes.
Yeah.
This is a game I can say that Matt showed it to me in its early stages, and I was like, this isn't just me being like, my friend, so I'm gonna say something nice. Literally after I played that game, I got that little itch later on in the day, like, I want to play it more.
Oh, thank you.
Just, wow, I got the itch. I got it. It's real. This game isn't even like done yet, and I just want to go back to it because there was so much promise there, and you had a lot of things that you were going to implement still. But I was just like, this is good, my dude. I'm so happy to see this.
Cool. Thank you. It came from a gameplay formula that I felt was, I think a game is really good when you play it when you've left the keyboard or the controller, or you've turned off the console.
Yeah.
And you're still thinking about it. And I was hoping to create something that I could imagine myself like thinking about in line, waiting for whatever. We spend a lot of our time in line. And
a little bit of that Tetris effect going on.
Yeah. And in many ways, the game originally would have been a much worse game because it would have been like a much more fast-paced game where I actually tried to make an action game. But a lot of my fellow programmer and coworker and collaborator, James Gary, he's sort of the lead programmer, and I do the secondary programming. I'm the lead design, he does the secondary design. A lot of his design work is to be like, are you sure this is the best way to do things? And accessibility has been kind of the thing that has made the game just a better project. And it was something that I sort of realized early in that part of what I'm excited to do is make games that don't have all the complexities and stressfulnesses that some of the games I've been working on have included. I'm proud of South Park Stick of Truth. I think it's a good game, and it's strangely like it's a role-playing game that is somehow less accessible than role-playing games I'd worked on in the past.
I loved that game.
Neverwinter Nights too. Well, not necessarily a better role-playing game. You could at least press space to pause it and get up and do something, deal with a screaming kid.
Oh, I lived most of the game.
Yeah, right? Whereas South Park had these little like Paper Mario style QuickTime events in them, which I worked on them. I intentionally put them in the game. In hindsight, they are an accessibility gap, where someone who might have enjoyed a role-playing game is suddenly like, cool, I'll never master these combat sequences because you threw in QuickTime events. And so kind of that line of thought had me going sort of away from an action title into something that's more of like a turn-based state machine of like, okay, can we take an action fantasy and break it down into like time segments and give the player like the ability to just get up and walk away whenever they want. And that kind of turned it into a much better game where suddenly the target audience could be folks who lost limbs in Iraq, people who have babies screaming at them. If we have time, there'll be an ability to hit Control B and bring up a boss key so that like a fake spreadsheet appears and maybe like a inbox or something like that. It's just so you can play the game at work. I really want to embrace this idea of players might not have full dedication or full focus and dedication to play your game. Certainly not like the older I've gotten, the less time I've had to sit down and play a game.
For sure.
It doesn't get easier when you have kids. And the other thing I'm working against is I think it's a little bit of an ableist point of view to assume that all player inputs are intentional.
Yeah.
For those of us who have perfectly working hands, I'd say like 95% of our inputs are intentional, but even those of us who, allegedly have great hand-eye coordination, we make bad inputs all the time. So I made a game with an undo button. I made a game that like tells you what you're about to do before you do it. And a lot of those things probably sound like, well, aren't you taking away a lot of the challenge? And hopefully not. If I've done it right, I've taken away the stress, but kept the puzzle and the challenge there. The goal is like, I can maybe give you complexity, but I take away the urgency and I take away the permanence of your decisions. Made a bad move? Press undo. You don't like how your stats are done? Just reshuffle your stats freely.
And that also puts difficulty into the player's hands. And honestly, we could talk for a lot longer about difficulty and particularly my obsession with it, but I really like games that allows you to make those decisions for yourself, that actually shows you beneath the hood. Because if it's like, you don't want to use the undo button, just don't.
Yeah.
Just don't do it then. Play it through.
There's also this thing I used to say was, if we make every little thing in our game hard to do, we can only ask our players to do little things.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Once easy things can be easy, you can start asking players to do all of those easy things at the same time. You can make a game that's really challenging even though it has an undo button.
Yeah.
Right? Like you make it so that once players have more control, like you said, over their inputs, you can ask more from them because they'll know why they lost. They made a series of decisions that, they took back the ones they didn't like. And then next time they have to figure out what's my way forward without doing that. It doesn't take away from it necessarily.
My assumption is like, okay, you were going to make a bad input and like, I have two choices as the game developer. I can send you back to the beginning of the level and be like, I'm going to punish you by making you have to retrace all your steps. Or I just say, this is a software tool for you to have fun, hit undo. Which is actually sort of the philosophy I have behind making games. I don't really like to say we're making games so much as we make software tools that enable entertainment. Like once you've purchased the game, you hopefully can enjoy it in whatever way you want. And it's not my job to tell you exactly how to enjoy it.
Yeah.
So yeah, you don't have to use that undo button, but I think most players will want it. And even if they are trying to play a really hardcore experience, they're going to realize, do I really want to spend 5 minutes reenacting what I'm doing or just hit undo? Maybe I value my time and I'll just hit the undo button.
Or you can record it on Twitch and get a bunch of views.
Yep.
Either way you win. People love watching you suffer on Twitch.
Here, my suffering for everybody's entertainment. Like and subscribe.
I mean, isn't that art?
Oh, boy.
Hey, I mean, in some ways, Twitch is your chance to turn suffering into revenue, right? So isn't that what like every artist has been trying to do, is turn suffering into revenue?
Oh, man.
It brings us full circle to what you were talking about, Annie.
Oh, my God.
If you want to suffer from your art, now you can.
Oh, it all loops back. It all loops back. Well, this has been really, really awesome. I think we mopped the floor with item degradation. We just picked it apart in a beautiful fashion.
Until it fell apart.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Matt, for coming on. Everybody, again, Matt MacLean. Awesome. His game Quarterstaff from Generic Lake Monster is in early access on Steam right now. Freaking get it.
Go get it.
It's awesome. I quite enjoy it, and I think you will too. Matt, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on. This has been wonderful.
Awesome. Whee! That was our interview with Matt MacLean. His game, Quarterstaff, is up right now on Steam Early Access.
Mm-hmm.
It's really great. Matt's really proud of his team. I'm proud of them by default because it's really good. And you should definitely, I don't know, you could be like, wishlist it. Just do that and then also just buy it.
Buy it. Do both.
Tell people to buy it because it's really great.
Yeah.
So that wraps up episode 2 of FrieNDA.
I hope you all enjoyed it and had as much fun as we did, because we always have fun with these.
So much fun.
Yeah. I think for me, at least, talking about game design is like my favorite thing, and you can't get me shut up doing it. I think I've already said that, but
Yeah.
It's always good. And I love talking about it with you, Annie.
Yeah.
And I think we had a really good conversation with Matt. So I think you guys are going to have already liked it, because, man, I keep losing the order of when things are.
Tenses are fun. Wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey, you know.
I don't know if you know this, kids, but things are not always recorded in the same order you hear them. Magic, studio magic.
Well, stay tuned for episode 3. We don't know what guest we'll have. We don't know what we're going to be talking about, but we do know it's going to be awesome.
And I know what question you're going to have to answer, and you won't get to know that. Yeah.
Oh, shit.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Miss you.